Xenar Prime. A world sculpted by perpetual twilight beneath a bruised, ammonia-rich sky. Here, towering obsidian cities rose from the inky oceans, their sleek surfaces reflecting the faint luminescence of bioluminescent algae blooms. This was the dominion of the Aquarians, a species as cold and fathomless as their home waters. They were beings of pure logic, their society governed by rigid protocols and unwavering adherence to duty. Emotion was seen as a weakness, a liability to be suppressed. Their lives revolved around the great algorithm, a complex system that dictated every aspect of their existence, from resource allocation to social interaction. Imagine blue, streamlined, militaristic dolphins, but perpetually grim, issuing directives in monotone clicks. At the heart of Aquarian society lay the Grief Emitters, towering structures that pulsed with a low, mournful hum. These devices were central to their cultural identity. The Aquarians, in their infinite wisdom, had engineered a solution to the chaos of emotion: mandatory, scheduled grief. Whenever the algorithm detected a potential societal disruption caused by joy, love, or even mild amusement, the Grief Emitters were activated. They blanketed the cities in waves of carefully calibrated sorrow, forcing the population into periods of collective mourning. This, they believed, maintained order and prevented the dangerous unpredictability of happiness. Lieutenant Krill, a rising star in the Aquarian military, adjusted his bioregulator, ensuring optimal oxygen intake from the murky atmosphere. His scales shimmered a dull gray in the twilight. He was a model Aquarian, unwavering in his devotion to duty, utterly devoid of humor. He'd never even considered smiling. The thought itself was illogical. Krill received his latest assignment via direct neural link. Human Ambassador David was proving problematic. Humans, an enigma wrapped in a poorly tailored suit. These creatures from Earth were illogical, prone to outbursts of inexplicable behavior driven by feelings. It was all very tiresome. Ambassador David, or Dave as he insisted on being called, a further breach of protocol, had been stationed on Xenar Prime for what the Aquarians considered a suspiciously short period. And already he was causing ripples in their meticulously ordered society. The report detailed Ambassador Dave's alleged misuse of Aquarian technology, specifically the Grief Emitters. Surveillance data showed him repeatedly accessing the central control panel, inputting commands that deviated wildly from established parameters. The specifics were classified, of course, but the implications were clear. Dave was tampering with the very fabric of Aquarian society. Krill felt a surge of something akin to annoyance. He immediately suppressed it, categorizing it as a waste of processing power. Still, this human's actions were a clear threat. He, Lieutenant Krill, would investigate. He would discover the nature of Dave's interference and neutralize the threat. For the good of the algorithm. For the good of Xenar Prime. Dave's living quarters were unsettling. A riot of color and mismatched furniture in a habitat designed for stark functionality. He had draped what appeared to be discarded earth textiles over the walls, depicting scenes of greenery. Krill found it deeply disturbing. Green was not a logical color. He found Dave in the middle of what could only be described as an act of technological sacrilege. The ambassador, clad in a brightly colored shirt depicting some sort of terrestrial animal, possibly a cat, according to the database, was hunched over a disassembled Grief Emitter control panel. Wires spilled out like the entrails of a dissected beast. Dave didn't seem to notice Krill's presence at first. He hummed a tuneless melody, a sound that grated on Krill's auditory sensors. He wielded a device that Krill identified as a soldering iron, emitting small bursts of light and a faint, acrid smell. The air hung thick with the scent of burnt metal and something else. Something sweet? Krill observed Dave's actions with growing consternation. He was attaching wires to circuits that were clearly not designed for them. He was bypassing safety protocols, disabling fail-safes. It was chaos. A deliberate act of technological vandalism, and the utter disregard for the established regulations surrounding the grief emitters was, frankly, insulting. The Aquarians treated these devices with the utmost reverence. They represented the cornerstone of their society, the key to maintaining order and stability. To see this human, treat them with such casual disrespect was almost unbearable. Krill felt a twitch in his dorsal fin, a physical manifestation of his internal turmoil. According to the surveillance reports, this wasn't an isolated incident. Dave had been making these modifications for weeks. He'd been observed carrying strange containers into the emitter control rooms, containers filled with unknown substances. He'd been seen making adjustments to the sonic resonators, the very components that generated the waves of grief. Krill had reviewed the data logs, attempting to decipher a pattern, a logical explanation for Dave's behavior. But there was none. The ambassador's actions appeared completely random, utterly devoid of purpose. He was like a child playing with a complex and dangerous instrument, oblivious to the potential consequences. It defied all logic. Krill decided to initiate contact. He cleared his throat, emitting a series of carefully calibrated clicks and whistles. "Ambassador David," he stated, his voice devoid of inflection, "your activities are irregular. Explain yourself." He fully expected a torrent of illogical babble, a string of meaningless justifications, but he was determined to remain calm, to extract the truth, for the good of Xenar Prime. "Ambassador David," Krill repeated, the clicks in his voice a little sharper this time. "I asked for an explanation." Dave finally looked up, a wide, almost manic grin spreading across his face. "Oh, hey Krill, didn't see you there. Just, making a few improvements." He gestured vaguely at the tangle of wires and circuit, boards with the soldering iron. A bead of molten metal landed perilously close to Krill's armored foot. Krill resisted the urge to recoil. "Improvements? To the grief emitters? Ambassador, with all due respect, and believe me, it is very little, your unauthorized modifications are a direct violation of Xenarian Code 729, subsection Delta, paragraph 4, which clearly states—" Dave held up a hand, interrupting Krill's recitation of regulations. Whoa, hold up there, buddy. No need to get your fins in a twist, it's all good, trust me." He winked, an expression that Krill found deeply unsettling. Why would a human intentionally distort their facial muscles in such a bizarre manner? "Trust you?" Krill's voice rose, in pitch. "Ambassador, your actions are destabilizing the very fabric of our society. The grief emitters are essential for maintaining social cohesion. They ensure that all citizens experience a period of collective mourning after significant losses, thereby reinforcing our shared identity and preventing individual emotional outbursts. You are tampering with the bedrock of our civilization." Dave chuckled, a sound that resembled the gurgling of a clogged drain. "Relax, Krill, seriously, I'm not trying to destroy your bedrock. I'm just, enhancing it a little." He picked up a small metallic cylinder and held it out to Krill. "Want a taste?" Krill eyed the cylinder with suspicion. It was emitting a strange, sugary aroma, the same scent he'd detected earlier. "What is that substance?" he demanded. "Is it a weapon? A hallucinogen? A dessert?" The last word escaped him before he could stop it. The concept of consuming something purely for pleasure was utterly alien to him. "It's, well, you guys call them nutritional supplements, right?" Dave said, carefully avoiding Krill's gaze. "I just, tweaked the flavor profile a little. Made them more palatable." He popped the cylinder open and offered it again. "Go on, try it, it's cherry-flavored, my personal favorite." Krill recoiled. "Cherry? That is illogical. Nutritional supplements are designed to provide sustenance, not sensory gratification. The very notion of flavoring them is an exercise in frivolous excess." He crossed his arms, or rather, the Aquarian equivalent of arms, which involved retracting his upper tentacles slightly. "Look, Krill," Dave said, his tone turning serious for a moment. "I know you guys have this whole stoic thing going on, and I respect that, sort of, but sometimes you just gotta let loose a little, It's good for the soul." He winced as if the phrase itself caused him physical pain, or whatever the alien equivalent of a soul is. The conversation was going nowhere. Krill realized that he was dealing with an individual who operated on an entirely different plane of logic, one that was utterly incomprehensible to the Aquarian mind. He decided to change tactics. "Ambassador," he said, his voice returning to its usual monotone, "I must insist that you cease all modifications to the Grief Emitters immediately. Your actions are causing concern among the High Council." Dave raised an eyebrow. "Concern? Really? Are they going to send the space cops after me? Because I'm telling you, I know my rights. I demand to see my lawyer. Or, the alien equivalent." Krill ignored the human's rambling. "The High Council has authorized a full investigation into your activities. You will be placed under surveillance, and any further unauthorized modifications will be met with appropriate measures." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Do I make myself clear?" Dave sighed dramatically. "Crystal. Loud and crystal. But hey, don't say I didn't try to bring a little joy into your lives." He turned back to the disassembled emitter, humming his tuneless melody. Krill felt a surge of frustration. He was no closer to understanding the human's motives than he had been before. As Krill departed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The High Council's suspicions were growing, fueled by Dave's bizarre behavior and the inexplicable alterations to the Grief Emitters. They feared that the human ambassador was not merely eccentric, but a saboteur, an agent of chaos sent to undermine their society from within. And Krill, despite his best efforts, was beginning to share their concern. The fate of Xenar Prime, it seemed, might rest on unraveling the mysteries of this one baffling human. The High Council convened an emergency session. Holographic projections of the 12 counselors flickered in the dimly lit chamber. Counselor Vrook, the eldest and most respected member, addressed the assembly. "The situation with the human ambassador is untenable. His actions are disrupting the delicate balance of our society. We must consider all possibilities, including the possibility of hostile intent." Counselor Lyra, a younger and more pragmatic member, spoke next. "But what could be his motive? What does he gain by tampering with the Grief Emitters? It makes no logical sense." "Perhaps," Counselor Vrook replied, "he seeks to weaken us, to sow discord among our people. Perhaps he is paving the way for an invasion." The room fell silent. The thought of an invasion was terrifying. The Aquarians had not faced a serious threat in centuries. They had become complacent, reliant on their rigid social structures and advanced technology. The idea that a single, seemingly harmless human could pose such a threat was both ludicrous and deeply unsettling. The counselors debated for hours, weighing the evidence, considering the potential risks. Finally, they reached a decision. Counselor Vrook turned to Krill's holographic projection. "Lieutenant Krill," he said, his voice grave, "you are hereby authorized to use any means necessary to determine the true purpose of Ambassador David's actions. If he poses a threat to Xenar Prime, you are to neutralize him." Krill felt a chill run down his spine. "Understood, Counselor," he replied, his voice devoid of emotion. He knew what he had to do. He had to uncover the truth no matter the cost. The future of Xenar Prime depended on it. Time continued its relentless march forward on Xenar Prime, and Dave, oblivious to the growing dread around him, kept right on tinkering. Krill, now operating under direct orders from the High Council, maintained a close watch. What he witnessed was perplexing. It wasn't sabotage. The human ambassador wasn't dismantling circuits or injecting viruses. Instead, he seemed to be repurposing things. Diodes were rerouted, power conduits were redirected, and strange, shimmering gels were applied to surfaces Krill couldn't even identify. The Aquarian military, never known for its patience, started mobilizing. Fleets of cruisers moved into defensive positions above the planet. Elite squads of Aquarian soldiers were put on high alert, their bio-rifles charged and ready. They anticipated a full-scale assault, perhaps a wave of emotionally charged attacks fueled by the altered emitters, or something far worse. General Vorlag, commander of the Xenarian Defense Forces, contacted Krill directly. Lieutenant, what is the status of the human threat? Are the Grief Emitters weaponized? Can they be countered? Vorlag's voice was a low rumble like tectonic plates grinding together. Krill hesitated. General, the ambassador's modifications are unconventional. I cannot confirm that the emitters are being weaponized. In fact, they seem to be changing. It was the most honest assessment he could offer, though it provided little comfort. Vorlag slammed a tentacle against his console, the sound echoing through the comms channel. Changing? What in the name of the great current does that mean, Lieutenant? Are they amplifying grief, spreading despair, giving everyone the uncontrollable urge to do interpretive dance? Give me specifics. Krill, despite the immense pressure, had to admit that he had no idea what was happening. He simply stated what he knew. Sir, the energy signatures emanating from the emitters are fluctuating erratically. The emotional resonance is unstable. I cannot predict the outcome. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the anticipation of impending doom. Vorlag finally broke it, his voice tight with controlled fury. Prepare for the worst, Lieutenant. We will defend Xenar Prime, whatever the cost. And if that human thinks he can use our grief against us, he will learn what true Aquarian sorrow really means. The transmission ended. The Aquarian military braced for a devastating attack, ready to defend their stoic way of life against an enemy they didn't understand, wielding weapons they couldn't comprehend. Krill, burdened by the weight of Vorlag's command and the impending sense of doom, finally confronted Dave. He found him humming cheerfully, surrounded by wires, circuit boards, and what appeared to be some kind of cooking appliance. Ambassador, Dave, Krill began, his voice echoing with the gravitas of 1,000 generations of Aquarian warriors. The High Council demands an explanation. What have you done to the Grief Emitters? Dave looked up, a wide, almost childlike grin spreading across his face. Oh, hey, Krill, almost finished here. Want to be the first to try it out? He gestured towards the strange machine with a flourish. I call it the Emoti Cinema 3000. Krill stared blankly. Emoti Cinema? What function does this device serve? Does it amplify psychic anguish? Does it broadcast subliminal messages of despair? Is it designed to make us question the very fabric of our reality? Dave chuckled, a sound that grated on Krill's nerves like barnacles on a hull. Nah, nothing like that, buddy. Relax, it's for watching movies. He reached behind the contraption and produced a small rectangular disc. Ever seen a film? Heard of popcorn? Krill's bioluminescent markings pulsed with confusion. Popcorn? Is that some kind of biological weapon? A neurotoxin disguised as sustenance? And film? Is that a form of propaganda designed to undermine our societal cohesion? Dave sighed, the sound of human exasperation filling the sterile chamber. Okay, look. The Grief Emitters, right? They tap into the collective emotional field. I just tweaked them a little. Now, instead of just broadcasting sorrow, they can amplify any emotion. And project images and, well, you'll see. He slapped the disc into a slot and the machine whirred to life. The air crackled with energy, and the familiar scent of ozone was quickly replaced by something buttery. Simultaneously, the walls of the chamber shimmered, resolving into a massive, distorted screen. What is this sorcery? Krill stammered, his mandibles twitching. Dave just grinned. It's called entertainment, Krill, and it's about to blow your little Aquarian mind. On the screen, a grainy image flickered to life. It was an old Earth movie, something about cowboys and aliens, horribly dubbed in Aquarian Basic. As the movie played, the strange machine began dispensing small, fluffy kernels into waiting receptacles. And this, my friend, Dave said, presenting Krill with a bowl, is flavored popcorn. I've got sadness-flavored, anger-flavored, even a little bit of existential dread flavored for the connoisseur. Krill, still reeling from the sensory overload, tentatively took a kernel. The moment it touched his tongue, his world shifted. he experienced a strange, unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't grief, it wasn't stoicism, it was amusement. Dave beamed. "Welcome to movie night, Krill. Turns out those mandatory mourning periods were just crying out for a little cinematic enhancement." The initial reaction from the Aquarian High Council was, predictably, one of profound horror. Forlag, his gills practically vibrating with rage, accused Dave of cultural desecration, technological blasphemy, and poor taste in cinema. He couldn't believe the human had taken their sacred grief emitters and turned them into some kind of entertainment center. The other council members were equally aghast. They saw it as a mockery of their traditions, a trivialization of their deeply ingrained stoicism. The idea of experiencing emotions for pleasure, of deliberately seeking out feelings other than duty and discipline, was anathema to everything they stood for. But then, something unexpected happened. Curiosity began to seep in. The younger, Aquarians, those less entrenched in the old ways, started asking questions. What exactly was this movie night? What did it feel like to laugh? And perhaps most importantly, what other flavors of popcorn were available? Krill, still processing the cowboy alien saga, found himself strangely drawn to the concept. The shared experience, the collective emotional resonance amplified by the repurposed grief emitters. It was unlike anything he had ever known. He felt lighter, almost happy. One evening, Krill found himself back in Dave's chamber, the Emoti Cinema 3000 humming softly. This time, however, he wasn't there under orders. He wasn't there to investigate. He was there, voluntarily. Dave greeted him with a knowing grin and offered him a bowl of freshly popped, existential dread-flavored popcorn. The movie began. It was an Earth comedy, something about a dysfunctional family and a talking dog, badly translated into Aquarian. Basic. The humor was crude, the plot nonsensical, and the dubbing atrocious. And yet, Krill found himself chuckling. A small, almost imperceptible sound at first, but soon it grew into a full-blown, uncharacteristic laugh. He looked around, embarrassed, expecting to be reprimanded, but Dave was just smiling. And to Krill's astonishment, he saw a few other Aquarians in the room, their faces equally transformed by the bizarre spectacle unfolding before them. They were laughing too. In that moment, something shifted on Xenar Prime. The Aquarians, for the first time in centuries, were experiencing the simple, unadulterated joy of entertainment. They were letting go of their stoicism, if only for a little while, and embracing the full spectrum of human emotion. The High Council, grudgingly, allowed the movie nights to continue, albeit under strict supervision. They saw it as a controlled release of emotions, a way to manage grief in a more productive manner, or at least, that's how they justified it in their official reports. And so, Xenar Prime slowly began to change. The Aquarians were still stoic, still disciplined, still dedicated to their military traditions. But now, they also had movie nights. They had popcorn. And perhaps most importantly, they had a glimmer of hope, a sense that there was more to life than just duty and discipline. They were cautiously embracing this new form of grief management, one poorly dubbed comedy at a time. Years passed on Xenar Prime, marked not just by military drills and strategic deployments, but by the weekly schedule of Emoti cinema screenings. The old Grief Emitters, now lovingly referred to as the fun machines in hushed tones, projected flickering images across the assembly halls. Flavors of popcorn became a complex art form, with Aquarian chefs competing to create the most emotionally resonant combinations. Existential angst with a hint of lime, nostalgic regret with seaweed sprinkles, and the surprisingly popular, pure, unadulterated joy with extra salt. The Aquarian culture, once a monolith of stoicism, had fractured in the most delightful way. While duty and honor still held sway, a newfound appreciation for the absurd had taken root. Debates raged not just about battle tactics, but about the merits of slapstick versus dark comedy, the proper use of a laugh track, and whether or not a rubber chicken could be considered high art. Lieutenant Krill, no longer just a lieutenant, but a decorated commander, found himself strangely at the heart of this cultural shift. He organized the movie schedules, mediated popcorn-flavored disputes, and even started a film club dedicated to analyzing the deeper meanings of Earth sitcoms. He still wore his uniform with pride, but now it was accessorized with a small, brightly colored popcorn charm. And what of Dave, the unassuming human ambassador who had inadvertently turned a planet of stoic warriors into movie buffs? He remained on Xenar Prime, a permanent fixture, a beloved oddity. He was always tinkering, always experimenting, always finding new ways to bridge the gap between human absurdity and Aquarian logic. One day, Krill found Dave in his workshop, surrounded by wires, circuits, and a disconcerting number of rubber ducks. "Ambassador Dave," Krill began, his voice a mixture of respect and weary amusement, "what exactly are you doing now?" Dave looked up, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Just a little something for the next movie night, Krill," he said, holding up a device that looked suspiciously like a repurposed underwater mine. "I call it the Audience Participation Enhancer. It's going to make those Earth action movies really immersive." Krill sighed. He knew with a sinking feeling that whatever Dave had cooked up would likely involve explosions, questionable special effects, and a whole lot of very confused Aquarians. But he also knew that somehow it would all work out. Xenar Prime, after all, had learned to embrace the chaos, to find the humor in the unexpected, to appreciate the strange and wonderful ways of the human heart. And it was all thanks to a little bit of grief, a lot of popcorn, and a human who taught aliens how to laugh.